I remember when the San Antonio Spurs beat the Miami Heat in the 2014 finals, and such a big deal was made about how many corner threes the Spurs generated and how big of an advantage it was. It seemed like from then on, for those that followed basketball closely at the time, myself included, we were slowly introduced to more analytical viewpoints. We suddenly knew what the most ideal shot profile was. Mid-range shots were out, threes, shots near the rim, and free throws were in. Advanced stats like usage rate, true shooting percentage, and VORP were now part of the NBA diehard vocabulary. I still don't completely know what qualifies as a screen assist. And tell me why I should care about something called the Sloan Sports Conference again? Of course, there was pushback from old heads, who felt that their brand of basketball was being threatened, that the nerds were taking over basketball.
And analytics don't work at all. It's just a crap to some people who were really smart, made up to try to get in the game because they had no talent. Because they had no talent to be able to play.
I agree with you on that, Joe.
So smart guys wanted to fit in, so they made up a term called analytics.
That if you lean too hard into analytics, into solving the equation, into building a team and formulating a play style mainly based on a computer model, your brand of basketball would be soulless, boring, or worst of all, the actual right way to win games. Basketball would become baseball. This isn't a shot against baseball. Baseball was actually my first love, and I still watch it to this day. But if I could Men in Black vaporize my brain so I didn't know or care what a pitcher's spin rate was, or a hitter's barrel rate is, I would do it. Anyway, there's no player I think embodies the NBA's analytical revolution more than James Harden. No executive I think of more than Daryl Morey. No team I think of more than the Houston Rockets. And I want to admit something. I took joy in watching those Harden teams, year after year, come up short in the playoffs. The Rockets were hardly the only team adapting to the times. In fact, the team constantly in their way were right beside them and changing how basketball was played forever. But to me, the Rockets and Warriors represented two completely different approaches to adapting to this new NBA world. The Rockets and Morey were very public in their approach. It's obviously more complicated than this, but if I were to boil it down, it was to generate as much threes, fouls, and dunks as possible, and the math would eventually win out. Their playbook seemed like it only contained one play. They put the ball in the hands of their best player as much as possible, surrounded him with corner shooters and a lob threat, and would run a high screen or watch him go to work in isolation. And depending on how the defense would react, there would be a kick out for a three, a lob for a dunk, a layup, or free throws. Watching a Rockets game from 2015 to 2020, you saw these outcomes over and over and over.
Or he could drive on it.
Their brand of basketball felt extremely calculated and cold. It was also very successful. And while the Warriors could jack up some threes themselves, they generated their shots through movement and passing. They valued chemistry, culture, and continuity just as much as analytical insights. There was room for a Sean Livingston turnaround jumper, an Andrew Bogut or Draymond Green decision at the foul line, and their two stars running countless miles without the basketball, not just for themselves, but for their teammates. But here's the thing. In the years since then, I've come to appreciate those Harden teams. Because if we're being honest, the only forces with any sort of chance at stopping those Warriors squads from coasting to those championships were those Rockets teams, LeBron James, Kawhi Leonard, and injuries. Which brings me to James Harden. Any way you slice it, statistically, Harden is one of the greatest offensive players we have ever seen. He'll more than likely end up top 10 in both points and assists. He's second all time in threes. He's top 10 in triple doubles if that's your fetish. But here's the bearded elephant in the room. When playoff season comes around and those high leverage playoff games that seemingly every championship team, or at the very least teams trying to win their first championship go through, many times Harden hasn't performed like a top 10 player on his own team, let alone a top 10 player ever. Not even close. And listen, if you play long enough, your favorite players are going to have some terrible moments, games, even series. Game 4 LeBron in the 2011 finals, Curry in Game 7 of the 2016 finals, Duncan missing a bunny in Game 7 of the 2013 finals, Kobe shooting 4 air balls in 5 minutes in 97. But what makes those players our favorite players is how they respond when they go through their worst professional moments publicly. Their moments of triumph outweigh their worst moments. What is the most memorable playoff moment of James Harden's career? Blocking Lou Dort's shot in the bubble? A game winner down 2-0 against the Warriors in 2016? Winning Game 1 in Boston while scoring 45 points without Joel Embiid? Harden deserves credit for all those moments, but his teams only won one of those series, and it was only in the first round. We'll get to how those other series ended in a bit. I think it's a touch of poetic irony that arguably the most memorable Houston playoff moment during his Rockets tenure came with him on the bench. Shout out Josh Smith and Corey Brewer. If it seems like I'm being harsh, I'm trying not to be. But even the starkest Harden defender has to admit there is a sharp contrast between who James Harden is on paper statistically over the course of his career and who James Harden is within the minds of the NBA fan consciousness when the calendar turns April. But look, today I want us to give Harden a fair shot. So let's take a look back at how his season ended dating back to 2014 and contextualize them to see if it's as bad as we all, at least all of us outside of Houston, think. So why 2014? Because I believe that's the start of James Harden becoming James Harden. He instantly became a star when he was traded by OKC to Houston in 2012. But 2014 is when he was truly unleashed. Jeremy Lin was traded away. Chandler Parsons signed with the Mavericks. That left Patrick Beverley and 37-year-old Pablo Prigioni as the only other competent ball handlers on the roster. It's not a coincidence 2015 was the first season his usage rate rose over 30%. It would stay above 30% for the next 6 seasons. The team was officially his, and he finished second for MVP in 2015. Harden at his peak. 5 top 3 MVP finishes, winning in 2018. 5 first-team All-NBA selections. The late 2010s will always be known for the Warriors vs. Cavs rivalry, but the Rockets were right up there with the Cavs as a constant foil for the Dubs. They met in the playoffs 4 out of 5 years, with those Chris Paul and James Harden teams truly threatening the Warriors for the Western Conference. But before the Paul and Harden partnership, there was the Dwight Howard-Harden one. They were much less threatening. Eliminated by the Dubs in 5 games in back-to-back years. These were good teams though, finishing second in the West in 2015. The problem? They were going against a great team. Josh Smith, Corey Brewer, Domantas Montejunas, and 37-year-old Jason Terry were heavily involved. No shade to these guys at all. I still believe in Montejunas, and he hasn't played in the NBA since 2019. But look at the dudes on the other side. The Rockets finished second in the West in 2015. They still finished 11 games behind the Dubs. Statistically at least, 2015 is Harden's best series against the Warriors ever. In the 2016 series, the volume was still there, but the efficiency wasn't. But he did have one of his few signature playoff moments, hitting a game-winning step-back mid-range jumper in Game 3 to avoid going down 3-0. The Rockets would lose the next 2 games by 27 and 33 points. Overall, I don't think you can fault the Harden-Howard teams that much for falling short. They were beaten by a definitively better team, a future dynasty in the making.
The first couple years in Houston, we just wasn't good enough. You know what I mean? Like we was making the playoffs, barely making the playoffs.
Howard left as a free agent before the 2017 season, but the construction of the roster finally started to resemble the ethos of a James Harden, Daryl Morey team. Ryan Anderson, Eric Gordon, and Lou Williams joined the squad and added plenty of shooting. Clint Capella slotted in nicely as a Dwight Howard replacement. Harden would average 29 points and led the league in assists, free throw attempts, and makes. The Rockets as a team led the league in three-point attempts and makes, with 5 different players in the top 20 for attempts. Harden finished second in an MVP race that remains controversial to this day. This was the Russell Westbrook triple-double MVP year, and regardless of where you stand years later, in the moment, for me at least, Westbrook winning didn't seem that bad. The combination of the triple-doubles, plus the narrative of him being the lone star that stayed in OKC, and the public's aversion to the Rockets' style of basketball definitely helped though. That being said, Harden still probably should have won, but you can at least see why Westbrook did. In 2017, the Spurs and Rockets would trade blowouts for 4 games, and after the Spurs won a close Game 5 that went into overtime, the Rockets would collapse in Game 6, losing by an unbelievable 39 points. At home, with Kawhi Leonard and Tony Parker injured for the Spurs. Harden took only 11 shots, had 6 turnovers to 7 assists, and was doubled up in scoring by Trevor Ariza. I don't know if this is the worst playoff game Harden has ever played, but I do know it's the most inexcusable. In his many defeats against the Warriors, you could at least make the argument that every time he lost against a better team, especially against the Durant teams. There's criticisms to be found for sure. For instance, my doubts about how far a style of play that is so heavily reliant on one player can take you. Go look back at the usage rates for every star player of every NBA champion since they started tracking these things. Not one player exceeds 35%. In fact, the highest ever usage rate happened just last year, with SGA at 34.8%, with Michael Jordan right on his heels at 34.7% in 1993. Harden's usage rates from 2018 to 2020 never dropped below 36%, peaking with a holy 40% in 2019. Coincidence? All I know is that Luka Doncic's usage rate, another heliocentric acolyte, when the Mavericks were defeated in the 2024 finals, 36%. Kobe's usage rate during his back-to-back title run without Shaq never went above 35%. The year they got swept by the Mavericks during their quest for a three-peat, 35.1. Does that mean we'll never have an NBA champion with a star player whose usage is over 35%? Probably not. But at this point so far, we have decades worth of evidence that points to the contrary. And 35% just happens to be the magical benchmark. So like I was saying, the Game 6 loss to the Spurs in 2017 is a prime example of why Harden's playoff reputation is where it is. It's bad to lose by 39 at home. It's bad to lose to a Spurs team who were missing two of its best players, including its best player. But what's inexcusable is the 11 shots. After this series, the whispers over his lack of aggression in high-leverage games started to get louder. The following offseason, the Rockets brought in Chris Paul, and his impact, as it usually is, was immediate. The Rockets won 65 games, finished first in the Western Conference, had the league's best offense, and Harden finally won his MVP. But once again, they would meet the Warriors in the playoffs, this time in the Western Conference Finals. The Warriors would jump out to a 2-1 lead, but Harden would score 30 points in Game 4 to tie the series in Golden State. In Game 5, the Rockets won a slobber knocker, somehow winning a game in which Harden shot 5 for 21 from the field, including 0 of 11 from 3. However, the Rockets would lose Chris Paul for the rest of the series, after he strained his hamstring with just a minute left in Game 5. Here was a prime chance for Harden to turn the narrative around. The Rockets had two chances to close out their faded rivals, including a Game 7 at home in their back pocket. If it got there, it would get there. They lost Game 6 by 29 points. A no contest. Somehow, Game 7 was even more depressing. At home, the Rockets would chuck and brick 27 straight three-pointers, an NBA record. Harden would miss 11 of those 27. Quick aside, someone actually did the math on the odds of a three-point shooting team of the Rockets' caliber missing 27 threes in a row. 0.00084%, or a 1 in 118,757 chance. Sports can be so hilarious and gut-wrenching all at the same time. Despite the historic cold streak, the Rockets stayed in the game, only entering the fourth down by 9, even getting as close as 6 with 5 minutes left. Harden had a very good fourth, scoring 10 points on 5 of 7 shooting. The problem was there was another generational scorer on the other side. In my opinion, this would be the biggest test the Durant-era Warriors would face when healthy, and it was a lot of fun to watch. Let's run it back. In 2019, they would again split the first 4 games, all of them close and down to the wire. This time, however, the Warriors would pull the Rockets from last year, winning Game 5 but losing Kevin Durant for the rest of the series in the process. Stephen Curry would even pull his very own 2018 Rockets shooting slump, going scoreless for the whole first half of Game 6. But that's where the similarities end. Curry played a masterful second half, scoring 33 points with 23 coming in the fourth. Harden would lead all scorers with 35, but on an inefficient 25 shots and more turnovers than assists. The Rockets were left with an all too familiar feeling, denied by Durant in the fourth in 2018, but this time it was Curry in 2019. Paul would leave the Rockets for OKC, and ironically matched up against his old team in the first round the very next year. The series would go 7 games, with Harden scoring less than 30 points only once for the first 6. In Game 7, he would take only 15 shots, score only 17 points, and was outscored by Robert Covington. But with the Rockets only up 1 with 4 seconds left, Harden would block Lou Dort's game-winning 3-shot attempt, add a feather to his cap. But once again, the Rockets' season would end in defeat. After a prolonged and grueling forced exit from Houston, Harden would be traded to the Nets in 2021, reuniting with former teammate and foe Kevin Durant, and along with Kyrie Irving, formed the NBA's newest Big Three. And in the very brief time they played together on a basketball court, they were brilliant, but were ultimately stopped by the Bucks, injuries, and a pair of size 18 Nikes from probably reaching the finals. Harden's series was abysmal, but don't let the stats fool you. He gets a pass here. This was the series where he injured his hamstring 43 seconds into Game 1, and was more decoy than player when he returned in Game 5. Watching in real time, you could tell he was compromised. For the second straight year, he was traded mid-season, this time to the Sixers, and positioned as Joel Embiid's running mate. At this point, it felt like Harden had transitioned to a different phase of his career. Still capable of scoring 30 on any given night, but more in flashes than the consistent volume scorer he was known as in Houston. I don't know if he was trying too hard to play distributor or trying too hard to be the Robin to Embiid's Batman, but after being tied 2-2 with the Miami Heat in the second round of the 2022 playoffs, Harden would only take 22 shots over the next 2 games, as his season ended yet again. For context, Tobias Harris would take 27 shots. Tobias Harris. Even more out of character, he would take 0 free throws in the Sixers' last game of the season. He would go scoreless in the second half. When asked why, he said, "The ball
just didn't get back to me."
Excuse me? You are effectively the point guard of this team. Nearly every half-court offensive possession starts with the ball in your hands. I can understand trying to play distributor. I can understand not wanting to force shots. I can understand taking those shots anyways and having a bad shooting night. I don't understand how one of the greatest individual offensive talents the league has ever seen decides to take 2 shots for the whole second half in a win-or-go-home playoff game. The next season would be a return to form, good and bad. Meeting the Boston Celtics in the second round, Joel Embiid would miss the first game of the series with an injury, and Harden would turn in one of his best playoff performances ever. 45 points, 7 threes, and most importantly, 30 shots. On the road, no less. The Sixers needed a scorer, and Harden delivered. Embiid returned in Game 2, but Harden's shot abandoned him. 5 for 28 over the next 2 games. With the Celtics threatening to go up 3-1, Harden turned in another masterful performance. 42-8-9 with only 1 turnover. A 1-point victory in overtime. After swapping road victories, another Game 7 awaited. The Sixers would be blown out by 24 points. And that is the story of playoff James Harden. The counting stats are impressive. The efficiency can be up and down, but that's not what's most frustrating. You take a look at his overall stats in a series, and you feel like the general perception around him as a playoff performer doesn't track. A 25-6-8 career playoff average isn't too shabby. What's most frustrating is that more often than not, in these high-leverage playoff games, in these high-leverage moments, he suddenly turns into something he's not. This is one of the most high-volume, high-usage superstars of his era, perhaps the highest. How can you only take 11 shots in a game? Not once, not twice, but 5 times in games where his team has a chance to either tie, win the series, or lose and they go home. I'll take the high-usage, low-efficiency Harden over passive Harden any day. At least go down swinging. There's a reason LeBron's series against the Mavericks still gets brought up even today. Not just because the Heat lost, but because of how LeBron performed in just a single game, Game 4. With a chance to go up 3-1 to win his first title, and in a game the Heat lost by 3 points, LeBron took just 1 shot in the fourth, and perhaps even more damning, attempted no free throws, inexplicably refusing to dribble the ball, let alone shoot during key moments. The rest of the series he was a little better than he was in Game 4, but he still faded down the stretch. The Mavericks won 4-2, and Dirk, deservedly, became a legend. But thanks to Skip Bayless and the typical social media response, the criticism, fair or not, was massive in the moment. But in the time since, LeBron has turned the nadir of his career into a very small part of it. A blip, not a trend. I mean, a little over a year later, the legend of headbandless LeBron was born. Obviously, LeBron has lost playoff series since. There have been ups and downs, but he's never turned in a playoff performance like that again. For Harden, it's been the opposite. Since he left the Rockets, what has been his best playoff moment? Scoring 45 points on 30 shots against the Celtics without Joel Embiid to steal Game 1 in Boston? Scoring 42 points in an overtime win in Game 4? He should get all the credit in the world for those games. So what happened in the winner-take-all Game 7 7 days later? 9 points and 5 turnovers in a 24-point blowout. How many shots did Harden take? Take a wild guess. There's no shame in losing a Game 7 to Nikola Jokic on a team with championship pedigree, but there might be in taking less shots than Derrick Jones Jr. in twice the minutes played. It's 2025, and the conversation surrounding Harden hasn't changed since 2015. However, I'll leave you with this, and it's what makes sports so great, is that as a player or as a team, you just need that one series, that one playoff run, that one moment, and and I hate this word, but it, legacy can change forever. Will one of the greatest offensive scorers of his era finally show up for his moment before it's too late? My name is Guy. Thanks for watching.